The knock on my front door didn't sound like a neighbor. It sounded like a verdict. Heavy. Repeated. Backed by someone who knew the law was on their side. By the time I opened it, my 8-year-old son Caleb was peeking around my hip, his Spider-Man pajamas bunched at the ankles. 2 people stood on the porch under the yellow porch light, a woman with a county badge clipped to her blazer, and a police officer just behind her, hands folded in front of his belt. "Mr. Walker?" the woman asked. My throat went dry. "Yeah." She gave me a practiced, sympathetic smile I didn't buy for a second. "We've received a report about an unsafe living situation involving a disabled adult in the home and potential emotional risk to the child. We need to come inside and speak with you and your son." Behind me in the hallway, I heard the soft scrape of a cane and the hesitant intake of breath I knew too well. Lily had woken up. She didn't say anything, but the sound of that cane across my hardwood floor was like a match on gasoline. "You're not taking my boy," I said, quieter than I felt. "Sir," the officer warned, already assessing the distance between Caleb and the door. My heart pounded so loud I could barely hear anything else. I had one hand on the doorknob, one hand on Caleb's shoulder, and the woman I had let into my house, into our lives, standing behind me like a walking target, in her oversized hoodie and brace on her leg. Somewhere deep under the panic and anger, one thought burned. This is what I get for opening the door that first night. And I knew I'd do it all over again. Before I go any further, tell me where you're listening from tonight and hit that like and subscribe button if you believe courage still matters in this world. My name is Daniel Walker, and if you drove past my place on the south side of Wichita, you wouldn't give it a second look. Beige, one-story chain-link fence, dented pickup in the driveway. I manage maintenance at a food distribution warehouse off the highway, the kind of job where your back hurts more than your feelings, and your home smelling like motor oil and onions most nights. Most people who meet me now just see a tired, middle-aged single dad with permanent circles under his eyes. They don't see the guy who used to run into burning buildings for a living, the firefighter who once believed every life could be pulled out if you just held your breath long enough and pushed hard enough. All that ended 3 years ago on a stretch of I-35 when a drunk driver cut across 3 lanes and turned my wife's car into twisted metal. By the time my crew got there, I was already on my knees in the breakdown lane, screaming her name into a wind that didn't care. I never went back on the truck after that. My body healed more or less. My faith in miracles did not. These days, my life is simple on paper. Wake up at 5-pack, Caleb's lunch, drop him at school. Spend 10 hours fixing broken conveyor belts and leaky pipes, then come home to homework battles and microwave dinners. I count every dollar twice, keep the mortgage just barely ahead of the past due notices, and tell myself that if Caleb goes to bed feeling safe, I'm doing enough. He's the bright spot in a world that's gone dull. Big brown eyes, front tooth missing, still believes his mom can hear him when he talks to the sky. He draws superheroes on every scrap of paper he finds, and somehow he always gives them my jawline. I don't know if I deserve that kind of faith, but I live off it. I don't drink. I don't go out. I don't invite new people in. My circle is my boy, my job, and the framed photo of my wife on the mantle that I still talk to when the house gets too quiet. I had decided without ever saying it out loud that this was it for me. No more risks. No more chances. Just survive one Tuesday at a time. All of that held steady, cold, safe, and small, until the night in late October when the first frost hit the city. Caleb and I stopped at a 24-hour laundromat because the dryer at home had finally given up on us. I was hauling a basket of damp clothes out of the truck when Caleb tugged my sleeve. "Dad," he whispered, pointing toward the far end of the parking lot. "Why is that lady just sitting on the curb like that?" "She's shaking." Under the buzzing streetlight, I saw her for the first time, a young woman in a faded army green jacket, one leg in a metal brace, a paper hospital bracelet still looped around her wrist, clutching a plastic grocery bag like it was the last thing tying her to the earth. People walked past her to the door, pretending not to see. I felt that old voice rise up in my head. "Don't get involved, Danny. You can't save everybody. Keep your head down." Then Caleb looked up at me with those big eyes that matched his mother's and said soft as a prayer Mom would have helped her, wouldn't she? That was the moment everything started to change. By the time we got the woman settled in the truck that night, wrapped in Caleb's spare hoodie and the emergency blanket I kept behind the seat, something in the air around us had already shifted, though I didn't understand it yet. Her name, spoken barely above a whisper, was Lily Carter. She said it like a confession, not an introduction. I didn't ask anything else. I just drove heater-blasting Caleb, watching her with that gentle concern only kids still know how to feel, without shame. I didn't realize until later how many eyes had been on us in that parking lot. In Wichita, folks don't miss much, they just pretend to. And they definitely talk. The storm didn't start until the next morning. At work, the warehouse buzzed with forklift engines and radio chatter, but the break room was louder, the kind of loud that comes from whispers, not machines. The minute I stepped in, 3 guys from night shift cut their conversation in half, giving me that sideways look usually saved for someone caught stealing lunches. "Morning," I muttered, heading for the coffee pot. No one answered. Then Neil, shift supervisor, 25 years my junior, and convinced that made him my commander, folded his arms and leaned back in his chair. "Heard you picked up some stray last night, Walker." I kept stirring my coffee calm on the outside. Inside, something tightened. "Don't know what you're talking about. You brought a woman home from a parking lot," he said loud enough for the guys by the vending machines to hear. "Homeless addict. Could be dangerous, man." I took a slow breath. God, how I hated gossip dressed up as concern. She was cold. She needed help. That's all. Neil snorted. "Or maybe you're lonely enough to take in anyone who blinks at you." The room erupted in the kind of laughter that's more teeth than humor. I didn't rise to it. I'd seen enough fires burn themselves out. But a small voice inside me whispered what I didn't want to hear. This is how rumors become weapons. When I got home, I found proof. Caleb's backpack was dumped on the couch, half-zipped papers spilling out. He sat at the table pushing peas around his plate. Shoulders drooped. That wasn't like him. When I asked what happened, he didn't answer at first, just kept drawing circles with his fork. "Hey," I said, gently crouching beside him. "Talk to me." He bit his lip. "Some kids at after school told me you brought home a crazy lady." My heart sank. "Who told them that?" He shrugged, eyes shining. "Their parents. They said you're letting someone dangerous sleep in our house." I closed my eyes for a moment. Adults thinking their whispers don't reach small ears they always do. "Is she dangerous, Dad?" he whispered. "No," I said, firm but soft. "She's hurt. That's different." He nodded, trusting me instantly, something I wished I trusted myself that easily. We ate in a silence, broken only by the hum of the fridge. But inside that silence, I felt the ground beginning to shift beneath us. People fear what they don't understand, and nothing spreads faster than a rumor born from fear. The tremor turned into a crack 2 days later. Saturday morning, the sun had barely risen when I heard the commotion outside car doors, slamming hurried footsteps on gravel. When I peered through the blinds, my stomach dropped. On my lawn stood my sister-in-law, Diane Mercer, my late wife's older sister. Blonde business suit posture, stiff as a judge's gavel. I hadn't seen her in months. She didn't knock. She pounded. I opened the door before she could break it. "Diane," What are you doing here? Her expression was all steel. I came because I heard what you've been doing, Daniel, and because someone has to protect Caleb. My jaw tightened. He's fine. Is he? Or is he living in a house with a complete stranger, an unstable one from what I've heard? There it was. The same assumption the guys at work made. The same whisper Caleb heard at school. She brushed past me into the foyer like she owned the deed. Where is she? Where's that woman sleeping? I said through gritted teeth. And you don't get to talk about her like she's trash. Diane crossed her arms. I have a responsibility to my sister's son. If you can't provide a safe environment, stop. My voice cracked just enough to make her blink. Don't you dare question whether I keep my boy safe. But she wasn't deterred. I've spoken to my attorney. If this continues, we may need to reevaluate who should be caring for him. For a moment, the world spun. The last time someone questioned my fitness as a father was the night my wife died, when I stood on the side of the interstate begging paramedics to save her. I thought I'd buried that humiliation. Turns out humiliation knows how to dig itself back up. Get out, I whispered. Diane hesitated, not because she feared me, but because she feared the line she was crossing. You know I loved my sister, and I love that boy, but if you drag him into a dangerous situation, I said, get out. This time she listened, but before leaving, she turned back to deliver one final blow. Daniel, whatever you're trying to fix in yourself by saving broken people, it won't bring her back. Then she walked down my porch steps and drove away, leaving the words hanging like smoke in a burned-out room. When I closed the door, I realized Lily had heard everything. She stood halfway down the hall, hair messy from sleep, hands trembling on her cane. I'm sorry, she whispered. I didn't mean to cause trouble. None of this is your fault, I said quickly. But she looked unconvinced, eyes darting between the door and the floor like she was already planning an exit. I can go, she murmured. I don't want to make things harder. The thought of her leaving hit me harder than I expected, maybe because of the bruises of judgment already forming inside me. Maybe because I'd seen that defeated slump in her shoulders before, on too many calls where the person didn't survive the night. You're staying, I said, more firmly than intended, but she didn't look relieved. She looked afraid. Not of me, of being the reason someone else suffered. That night I found her in the living room, sitting in the glow of the TV, though it wasn't turned on, just the quiet blue light flickering across her face. She didn't move when I sat beside her. People talk, I said softly, especially when they're scared of what they don't understand. She wiped at her cheek. Your sister-in-law was right. You don't know anything about me. Then tell me I said, or don't. But I'm not throwing you out because the neighborhood got jumpy. Silence stretched between us, heavy, but honest. Finally, she whispered, I wasn't always like this. I had a job, a life, people I loved. And then, an accident took most of it. I didn't push for details. Pain doesn't like being interrogated. Instead, I just said, you're safe here. Whether she believed me or not, I couldn't tell. But the next morning, the storm that had been building finally touched down. I was making pancakes when someone knocked, not Diane this time, but a man in a crisp button-down shirt with a badge clipped to his belt. He introduced himself as a social worker, following up on a community concern. Behind him, my neighbor, Mrs. Alvarez, stood with her arms folded, lips pursed the way they get when she's convinced she's protecting children everywhere. I'm here to assess the environment, the man said. There have been reports of an unstable adult residing in the home with a minor. My hand froze over the pan. The smell of burning batter filled the kitchen. Caleb, still in pajamas, peeked around the corner. His face paled when he saw the badge. Lily stepped out from the hallway, at the same moment cane trembling slightly in her grip. The social worker looked between her, my son, and me. The line Diane warned me about was now on my kitchen floor, waiting for someone to step across it. The pressure in that moment didn't just rise, it broke skin. The social worker stepped farther into the kitchen, his pen already moving across a clipboard, his eyes scanning everything, Lily's trembling hands on her cane, Caleb clutching the edge of the counter, the scorched pancake smoking on the skillet. I felt the air tighten, the whole room, shrinking into a single point of pressure. "Sir," he said, "we need to speak privately. Reports indicate a potentially unsafe adult in proximity to your child." Lily's breath hitched. Caleb's shoulders drew up like someone had struck him. The moment felt fragile enough to snap with a whisper. "I'm right here," I said, forcing my voice steady. "You can talk to all of us." "That's not how this works," the man replied. "Your son may need to answer questions without you present." Caleb's eyes went wide, panic swelling behind them. I saw him swallow hard, lips trembling. This wasn't evaluation. This was intrusion dressed as protocol. Mrs. Alvarez stepped forward from the doorway with a righteousness that made my teeth grind. I only did what any responsible neighbor would. Children deserve safety. Lily flinched like the words were aimed at her spine. For a second, I couldn't breathe. All the losses, all the nights spent awake, listening to the house settle, because silence was louder than grief. All the guilt I carried about not being able to save my wife, it all pulsed right under my skin. And now these people wanted to decide if I could save my son. The social worker moved closer to Caleb. "Come with me, buddy. We'll just have a little chat." Caleb shook his head violently, stepping back until he hit my leg. "I'm not going anywhere without my dad." "Sir," the worker warned, failure to comply could. Whatever came next vanished under the sound of breaking glass. A thunderous shatter exploded from outside like a crash echoing through metal and pavement. For a heartbeat, none of us moved. Then came the screech of rubber and the unmistakable whine of a car engine revving out of control. Dad Caleb whispered, voice thin with fear. My hands moved before thought caught up. I bolted past the social worker down the hallway, yanked open the front door. What I saw punched the air out of me. A silver sedan had jumped the curb across the street, skidded sideways, and was now fishtailing toward a group of kids riding bikes. One of them, impossibly, terribly, was Caleb's best friend Mason, frozen with his foot caught in the pedal. Time didn't slow down. It sharpened. Everything became edges, sound color, cold. My pulse hammered in my ears, but another rhythm rose beneath it, one I hadn't heard in 3 years. The old training kicking in the internal command that used to override fear when lives were on the line. Move, Walker. Now. I sprinted across the yard, boots sliding on the frosted grass. Behind me, the social worker yelled something, but his voice dissolved in the roar of the oncoming car. Mason was still struggling, wide-eyed, limbs locked. The sedan's front bumper jerked as the wheels spun, trying to grip. It was going to hit. I leapt the ditch, hit the pavement hard enough to send pain shooting up my ankle, but I didn't slow. I reached Mason's bike, grabbed the handlebars with one hand, and shoved the kid off the seat with the other. He fell rolling toward the grass just as the sedan slammed into the bike. The impact threw me backward, metal twisting heat, rushing debris clattering. But I held on long enough to push the kid clear. The world spun. Pavement scraped my shoulder. Something cracked against my ribs. Then everything stopped moving. For a moment, all I heard was the harsh, uneven idle of the car engine and the distant echo of someone screaming my name. When I forced my eyes open, Mason was crawling toward the yard, sobbing but alive, bike in pieces, car hissing, my chest on fire, but alive. Voices erupted around us, neighbors shouting, someone dialing 911, a woman crying into her hands. Then I heard the footsteps I feared and hoped for in equal measure, Caleb's. He dropped to his knees beside me. Dad, are you okay?" His voice cracked on the last word. I reached for his hand, squeezing it, even though my arms trembled. "I'm right here, buddy." Behind him stood the social worker, clipboard, forgotten, face pale. He stared at the broken bike, the crushed curb, the black skid marks trailing like scars across the asphalt. And then he stared at me. Really stared, like he was seeing someone he hadn't expected. I saw realization hit him. I hadn't hesitated. I hadn't calculated risk. I'd moved the way someone who had spent years running toward danger instead of away from it moved. Mrs. Alvarez whispered behind him, "He saved that boy. He saved him." But I wasn't looking at them. I was looking at Lily. She stood at the edge of the street, one hand gripping her cane, the other pressed to her mouth. Her eyes were full of the same terror I remembered seeing in families outside burning homes. But there was something else there too, something deep and breaking open. Relief and guilt, and something softer that she wasn't ready to name. The car's driver stumbled out, an elderly man, shaking like he was made of paper. I didn't see the turn my brakes. Oh God, I'm sorry." "It's okay," I said, before anyone else could. "No one's hurt." Paramedics arrived minutes later, checking me for injuries while neighbors clustered in tight circles, murmuring my name like it was a surprise gift. The social worker paced phone pressed to his ear, eyes still darting between me and the crushed bike frame. Caleb held my hand through all of it, refusing to let go. When the ambulance doors finally closed, and I assured them I didn't need a ride to the hospital, the social worker approached slowly, like he was walking into a different story than the one he stepped into. "Mr. Walker," he said quietly, "I didn't know you had emergency response training." I met his eyes. "You didn't ask." He nodded, swallowing whatever rigid script he'd walked in here with. "I'll need to update my report. Clearly your home environment demonstrates protective capacity. That was bureaucratic language for 'you're not the man I thought you were.' But the moment that mattered was still coming. After the police finished statements, after the crowd thinned out, after Mason's parents hugged me so fiercely it knocked the breath out of me, I turned back toward my house. Lily stood in the doorway, eyes red, shoulders trembling. I thought she whispered as I reached the porch, "I thought you were going to die." Her voice cracked on the last word, just like Caleb's had. That matching pain did something to me. "I'm okay," I said. "You ran into the street for someone else's child," she murmured, shaking her head like she couldn't comprehend it. "I'd do it again," I replied. "Every time." Her eyes glistened. Why? Because I had failed. Once failed to save the woman I loved, failed to outrun the wreckage that took her. Because every life in danger still felt like a message I couldn't ignore. Because I saw something in Mason's fear that lived in my own son's eyes the night I told him his mother wasn't coming home. But I said only what she needed to hear. Because protecting people is the one thing I know how to do. Her breath shuddered. "Including me, especially you." The words hit her like a warm hand on a cold shoulder. She looked down, gripping her cane so tightly her knuckles whitened. Behind her, I heard the soft click of the social worker's pen. He had witnessed everything: the collision, the rescue, the chaos, the aftermath. And now he was seeing something else entirely, that Lily wasn't a threat in our home. She was part of why I ran without hesitation. His voice was gentler now. "Mr. Walker, I'll be returning for a follow-up visit. But based on what I've seen today," he glanced at the wreckage across the street, "it's clear your son is in a stable and safe environment with people who care deeply about him. No apology." but recognition. Respect, even. For now, it was enough. The neighborhood shaken by the crash remained oddly quiet as the last patrol car pulled away. I felt the weight of the day sinking into my bones like cold rain, but inside the house, the lights were warm. Caleb stayed glued to my side. Lily hovered close like she wasn't sure if she was allowed to, but couldn't help herself. Everything could have ended differently. But it didn't, and everyone who mattered had seen the truth. What I didn't know was that this moment, this street, this crash, this instinct had set off a chain reaction that would change everything about the fight ahead. For the rest of the afternoon, the neighborhood stayed strangely hushed, as if no one wanted to disturb the echo of what had almost happened. A twisted bike frame still lay on the crushed grass across the street, and streaks of rubber marked the pavement like someone had underlined the moment with a thick black pen. Inside my house, everything felt suspended. Caleb hadn't let go of me for almost an hour, sticking to my side like a shadow. He kept checking my breathing, my hands, my ribs, even though the paramedics had already cleared me. Every so often he'd run his fingers over the scrape on my forearm and whisper, "It could have been so bad." And on the far side of the living room, perched on the edge of the armchair, like she didn't quite belong to the world, yet, sat Lily. She hadn't said much, just watched me with eyes that carried some huge, wordless storm. She held her cane across her lap, both hands wrapped tightly around it, as if letting go meant she'd fall apart. The social worker lingered by the front door, pretending to finish paperwork, but really processing everything he'd seen. His eyes drifted repeatedly from his forms, to me, to Lily, like his mind was rearranging the pieces of a puzzle he'd been sure he understood when he arrived. Eventually, he cleared his throat. "Mr. Walker, may I ask you something?" I nodded. "That maneuver you did pushing the child out of the car's path, the timing, the positioning..." He hesitated. Most civilians wouldn't have reacted that way. It looked trained. I glanced at Caleb. He was busy folding a blanket, listening but pretending not to. I took a slow breath. "I wasn't always a maintenance supervisor," I said quietly. The social worker waited, pen poised. I hadn't talked about it in years, not since the accident that took my wife. I'd packed away the uniform, the helmet, the commendations, the awards, buried every reminder in the back of my closet because looking at them felt like looking straight into a wound that never fully healed. But today had peeled something open, and the truth didn't feel like it wanted to stay hidden anymore. I was with Wichita Fire and Rescue for 14 years, I said. Search and rescue specialist, vehicle extrications, chemical fires, high-risk incident response. Mrs. Alvarez gasped softly from the doorway. I hadn't even noticed she'd stepped back inside. The social worker blinked. "You were a firefighter." "Yeah," I said, rubbing the back of my neck. "A good one, too. Or at least I tried to be." "Why did you leave?" he asked gently. The question hit like cold water. Caleb set the blanket down and touched my wrist, knowing the answer before I spoke it. 3 years ago, I said, voice lower. My wife was driving home from her nursing shift. A drunk driver crossed the median. By the time my team got there, my throat tightened. The room blurred at the edges. I didn't finish the sentence. I didn't have to. The social worker's eyes softened. Even Mrs. Alvarez looked stricken, hand drifting to her chest. "I couldn't save her," I murmured. After that, I couldn't walk back into a burning building without seeing her car instead. Silence wrapped around us, heavy and human. Then, unexpectedly, Lily spoke. Her voice was rough, shaky, but sure. "You saved that boy today," she whispered. In less than a second. You didn't even think. That's the training, I said. No, she replied, leaning forward. That's your heart. Something in her gaze was different now, stronger, steadier. She looked like someone who had carried her own pain through a long winter and was suddenly seeing another person's spring beneath it. The social worker clicked his pen, but didn't write. Mr. Walker, had I known your background, I would have approached this home visit differently. I arched a brow. Would it have changed anything? His expression faltered. Yes, completely. He turned a little toward Lily, not in judgment anymore, but curiosity. And how do you know, Mr. Walker? Lily straightened, gripping her cane a little less tightly. He found me outside a laundromat the night I was discharged from the hospital. I had no place to go, no family to call. He didn't ask questions. He didn't let me freeze. The social worker listened, really listened. I have a neurological condition, she continued. It affects my balance, my mobility. I'm relearning how to walk. It slowed down my whole life. I lost my job, my apartment. People made assumptions. Her eyes flickered toward Mrs. Alvarez. But Daniel never did. Her voice wavered. He treated me like someone worth saving. My chest tightened, not with guilt this time, but something warmer, something that felt almost like hope finding its footing again. The social worker cleared his throat. Miss Carter, I appreciate your honesty. It helps clarify a lot. What does that mean for us? Caleb asked, small voice breaking the tension. The man crouched down to Caleb's level. It means your dad did something extraordinary today. And it means I need to rewrite my entire report. Mrs. Alvarez stepped forward, wringing her hands. Daniel, I'm so sorry, she murmured. I didn't know. I just thought I was trying to protect the children. I nodded, exhausted. I know you meant well. But I was wrong, she said. You've always looked out for this neighborhood. I should have trusted you. Her eyes drifted to Lily. And you, dear, I shouldn't have assumed anything about you either. The apology hung there, fragile, but sincere. For the first time in days, the house didn't feel like it was shrinking around us. It loosened, almost expanded, like a space opening for the truth to breathe. The social worker stood. Given everything that's happened, I need to speak to my supervisor. But I want you to hear this clearly. Nothing about what I've seen today suggests this is an unsafe home. Quite the opposite. I exhaled, shoulders sinking with relief. But then he added something unexpected, something that shifted the air again. Mr. Walker, the fire department's search and rescue division is rebuilding. They've been trying to recruit experienced veterans back into training roles. What you did today? He pointed vaguely to the street. It's the kind of instinct and composure they can't teach. I stared at him, stunned. Are you offering me a job? He chuckled. Not officially. I'm just saying the battalion chief is a friend of mine. If you ever wanted to return, not to frontline calls, but to mentor younger crews, I think they'd want to talk to you. My heart stuttered. I hadn't stepped near a firehouse since the funeral. The very idea felt like touching a scar with bare hands. But something inside me, something I thought had died, stirred. Caleb grabbed my hand. Dad, you always tell me not to quit things just because they're hard. Lily's expression softened, full of quiet understanding. Some doors close until you're ready to open them again. I swallowed hard. I don't know if I'm ready for that. You don't have to be the social worker, said. Just think about it. The department could use someone like you, someone like me, not a man defined by failure, not a widower trapped in grief, not a father being judged by gossip or fear, someone who still had something to give. The social worker packed his forms and shook my hand. You'll hear from us within the week, but I don't anticipate any problems with the case. Case. The word had hung over me like a shadow for days. Hearing it now without the weight behind it felt like stepping into sunlight after a long storm. After he and Mrs. Alvarez left, the house grew quiet again. But it wasn't the brittle quiet from before. It felt warmer, steadier, like something in the foundation had been repaired. I walked to the couch and sat beside Lily. She didn't shift away. "You didn't have to tell them everything I said." "I wanted to," she replied. "You're not the only one with a past." We looked at each other not with fear or apology, but with a kind of unspoken recognition, two people carrying broken pieces. They were finally willing to stop hiding. Caleb curled up beside me, resting his head on my arm. "Dad." "Yeah, buddy. You're kind of a superhero." I laughed softly. "Not even close." Lily smiled. "He's closer than he thinks." And for the first time in a long time, I let myself wonder maybe she was right. But outside on the street, still stained with the tire marks of what almost happened, a different kind of mark had been made. One that would change the next chapter of our lives in ways none of us could yet see. An open door, a second chance, and a decision I knew I couldn't avoid for much longer. Word traveled faster than I expected. By the next morning, half the neighborhood had already stopped by with casseroles, cookies, and a kind of sheepish kindness you only see after folks realize they underestimated someone. Even Mrs. Alvarez knocked again this time, holding a loaf of banana bread so fresh it was still warm. She didn't try to defend herself. She just said, "Thank you for saving that boy," with a sincerity that didn't need any decoration. The social worker returned 2 days later, not with tension in his shoulders this time, but with the easy posture of someone delivering good news. He sat at my kitchen table, sipping the coffee I offered him, and told me the case was closed without restrictions. No questions about Lily's presence, no follow-ups, no concerns. "You're raising your son in a home filled with stability and compassion," he said. "That's what matters." When he left, I felt a weight lift off me I didn't know I'd been carrying around my neck. For the first time since Diane barged in, the house didn't feel like it was under a microscope. Later that week, the battalion chief, the same one I'd worked under when I first joined the fire department, called me himself. His voice hadn't changed, raspy, steady, a little worn at the edges. He'd heard the story of the rescue. "Walker," he said, "you've still got the instincts. You ever think about coming back? Not to the rigs you've paid your dues, but we could use a trainer who's actually been in the thick of it." My chest tightened with something between fear and longing. "I don't know," I said honestly. "It's been a long time." "That's exactly why I want you," he replied. "Men who've known loss teach differently. They teach with heart." I told him I'd think about it, and for the first time in years, I really meant it. But it wasn't just the world outside shifting. Something inside our house softened too. Lily walked a little steadier each day, her cane tapping out a rhythm that felt less like survival and more like progress. She helped Caleb with school projects, cooked simple meals when I worked late, and filled quiet spaces with a gentleness that reminded me of what hope used to feel like. One evening, not long after the crash, Caleb sat between us on the couch, watching an old cartoon rerun. Without looking away from the screen, he slipped his small hand into mine, and then reached his other hand for Lily's. "You're both my people," he said matter-of-factly. Lily blinked fast, throat tightening. I didn't say anything. Some moments don't need words, they need stillness, so they can settle exactly where they're meant to land. Months passed. The season changed. Spring rolled into a warm Kansas summer, and our little home found its new rhythm. I took the part-time position at the academy after long talks with Caleb and Lily. Not a return to the chaos of live calls, just training recruits, showing them how to read a collapsing roof. how to cut open a crushed door, how to steady their breath when every instinct screams otherwise. Standing in front of those young men and women, I felt something I hadn't felt since before the accident: purpose that didn't hurt to carry. Purpose that didn't break me open every time I touched it. Lily started physical therapy twice a week. Slow progress at first, tiny victories that felt like mile markers to her. The day she let go of the parallel bars for 3 full seconds, she cried, then laughed, then cried again. Caleb made a chart on the fridge labeled "Lily Wins," adding a star every time she reached a new milestone. The house, once quiet enough for grief to echo in the walls, now hummed with life again. Pancake breakfasts, mismatched socks, arguments about bedtime. 3 people learning how to be a family without needing a name for it yet. A year after the crash, the one outside our house that changed everything, we gathered for dinner in the backyard under strung-up patio lights. Caleb had set the table himself, uneven silverware and all. A soft breeze rustled the cottonwood trees, carrying the smell of grilled corn and summer earth. I watched Lily step carefully down the back porch with only a slight tremor in her legs. She moved slower than most people her age, but every step carried a quiet pride. When she reached the table, she looked up at me with a smile that held both gratitude and something deeper. Something like a second chance. "You doing okay?" I asked softly. She nodded, eyes bright. "Better than okay?" Caleb raised his lemonade like a toast. "To Dad," he said. "For being brave." I shook my head. "To all of us," I corrected. "For not giving up." We clinked glasses, plastic ones, scratched and mismatched, but in that moment they might as well have been crystal. Later, after Caleb fell asleep on the hammock, Lily and I sat side by side, watching the last bit of daylight fade. She rested her hand on mine, not hesitant this time, but certain. "You know," she said quietly, "people think storms ruin things, but sometimes they clear space for better things to grow." I looked at her, really looked, and realized she wasn't talking about weather. "Yeah," I murmured. "They do." From somewhere deep in me, past the grief, past the fear, past everything I thought was gone, I felt something steady and warm take root again. And as the first stars came out over the Wichita sky, I understood something I hadn't known how to believe a year earlier. Some losses stay with you forever, but so do the people who walk into your life when the world thinks you're done. And sometimes the bravest thing a man can do is let himself live again.